Now available on Blu-ray from MVD is 525.77. Does that number ring any bells? Does that have any meaning for you? Because it really seriously did for Patrick Reed Johnson, the director, writer, liver, that doesn't sound good. The person whose life this film is based on. Patrick Reed Johnson was this kid who lived in the Midwest, and he saw 2001 at a young age and blew his mind, made him want to be a backyard filmmaker. It's really funny to do this review right after seeing The Fabelmans, which is about almost the same thing, but just like a different generation. Patrick Reed Johnson lived in the Midwest, far from Hollywood, but made these really elaborate backyard home movies on Super 8 that were like sequels to iconic films. So he has Requiem for the Planet of the Apes, and he has, like, instead of Space 1999, it's like Space 2000 or whatever it is. And he uses extensive use of models and neighborhood kids and siblings and best friend to make these backyard epics. Some of which he never finishes, but he just keeps shooting. And eventually, I'm giving you the broad strokes of the story and where this fits in. He idolizes Douglas Trumbull, special effects genius behind 2001 and Silent Running and many other films. And all he wants to do is grow up and work for Douglas Trumbull in special effects. Eventually, he is able to meet Douglas Trumbull, to go to Hollywood. This is really kind of giving the whole movie away, but it's really the key to the movie. I don't usually do this. He is able to go to Hollywood and sneak into, and when I say sneak, be brought into Industrial Light and Magic, ILM, and get to see a rough cut of Star Wars before anybody else has seen it. Takes that back with him to rural Illinois or Indiana and says to all his friends, I've seen the second coming. I have seen my future. I've seen everybody's future. It's this movie called Star Wars. You really got to see it. And then he kind of obsesses about getting everybody to go see Star Wars. So that's the basic idea of the movie. Now, the Star Wars element of this film is really like, and this movie's fairly long. This is, again, like 2.5 hours, let's say. This Star Wars element is really kind of the end of the movie. It's maybe the last 20 minutes of it. So I went into this movie thinking it was entirely about, for some reason, this is a movie that's been coming for like almost 20 years. This movie was like 18 years in the making. Patrick Johnson was a guy who went on, not to give anything away, the movie really doesn't. He went on to be a special effects guy in Hollywood. He wound up doing the film Dragonheart. He wound up doing the film Space Invaders. He wound up working with the ILM people and Douglas Trumbull. That in no way gives anything away about the movie, because the movie really isn't about what he did after he was a kid. It's about what he did when he was a kid. And basically over time, he was able to get this film made. Over a long period of time, he was able to get this film made. And produced by Gary Kurtz, who's the guy who produced the original Star Wars. And the film really is about his passion for filmmaking, his passion for movies, and how that gets in the way of his reality, how his addiction to fantasy gets in the way of relationships, gets in the way of him being able to rate to other people. There's a great line in the movie, I'll probably mangle it, where his best friend and star of all of his epics says, for most people, movies are what they do to escape reality. For you, reality is what you do to escape movies. And that is certainly true of me and a lot of people I know. So this film may speak to a lot of people. It's been highly anticipated. This film has been talked about for a decade or two, maybe more. I mentioned it to a friend of mine. He's like, oh yeah, I've been wanting to see that since the 90s. I don't know if it's been made for that long, but certainly the early 2000s. And I can't think of the actor's name. I'm sorry, I'm going to blank. I don't have my notes. I'm going to blank on a lot of names. But the only recognizable faces in this movie really are Colleen Camp, who plays Patrick's mother, and Austin Pendleton, who plays the man who runs American Cinematographer magazine. It's got a lot of cameos I found by the actual people who grew up with Patrick Johnson, the actual people who these characters are based on are throughout the movie. And this is one of those films, for me personally, the story of the movie was more entertaining and interesting for me than the movie. It's probably just how I am, but watching the movie, it really felt to me very pieced together. And it was very clear to me that some things were done later, or some things were things that they didn't quite get on the day, and they used special effects or editing tricks to turn into something else. And it felt very patchwork to me, and maybe a little long for me. And that's part of it is my perception, because I went into this thinking this is all just about kids who are obsessed with Star Wars. It really isn't. It's about one kid who's obsessed with Star Wars, and that's really toward the end of the film. But this is funny, and this doesn't speak to the film itself. It speaks to this Blu-ray package from MVD. You get a long Q&A that Patrick Johnson did at, I believe, Fantasia Film Festival. You get some early trailers or some trailers for the movie. You get some stills, and you get a commentary. Through the Q&A and the commentary, I get a much bigger appreciation for the movie. Patrick Johnson's a super nice guy, super sweet guy, film fan like we are, and him talking about what it took to get this movie made and what they did. The commentary is fascinating because you can watch the movie and he'll say, this right there was actually CGI, a CGI mouth animated on an earlier piece of footage because we didn't have that line, or this was done later. A lot of the special effects in the movie are done intentionally to look like the models he did as a kid, which I didn't get that until partway through the movie, where you'll see like a wide shot of him driving, and it's very much a set. Models and miniatures on a set. So the film is very much a love letter to the special effects movies, the sci-fi movies of the late 60s, up to the mid 70s, and Star Wars to a degree. He's friends with the ILM people. He got permission to use clips from Star Wars. You hear, which I'd never heard, the actual radio spots for Star Wars. So it's a fun time capsule. It's a very DIY film. It has a lot of heart. It's got a tremendous amount of heart in it. It does harken back to movies like American Graffiti, or for me personally, like Detroit Rock City. These movies about people who are obsessed with a thing that seems out of reach for the place you are in your life and where geographically you are in your life. But if you stick to it and the passion and the fire burns, you might just reach that star, as Casey Kasem would say, or Star Wars in the case of this. So it's finally out. This movie has been playing festivals for years. It's been toyed with and tweaked and continually worked on for decades by Patrick Johnson. It is a wonderful accomplishment that this movie is finally out. I hope it finds its audience. I personally didn't love it for technical reasons more than anything else, but looking back, when I watched it a second time with the commentary, I liked it a lot more. So available now on Blu-ray from MVD is Patrick Reed Johnson's very personal, very sweet ode to that day in May and that time and place, 5/25/77.